Breaking today, shocking new details have emerged about why George and Amal Clooney ditched Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. I do love the fact that it is the Clooneys that are now delivering Harry and Meghan a taste of their own medicine. They're being ghosted. See how it feels? Not very nice, is it? But incredibly well deserved. This is so mortifying for Harry and Meghan because you can just imagine, Tash, they are really the ones that tend to ghost people. So the fact that they are now being ghosted is really interesting to me.
For years, Prince Harry reportedly believed he had one of the most valuable friendships in Hollywood. George and Amal Clooney weren't just famous faces, they were widely seen as one of the world's most powerful couples, moving effortlessly between entertainment, philanthropy, international events, and elite social circles. According to recent reports, Harry genuinely expected the Clooneys to stay close for years to come, but today, that friendship looks nothing like it used to. According to various reports, Harry has reportedly been left disappointed by the apparent collapse of his bond with George and Amal. What makes this situation so fascinating is that there was no public blow-up, no dramatic fallout, no screaming headlines. The connection just faded, quietly. Invitations reportedly dried up. Public appearances together vanished. The once high-profile link between the Sussexes and the Clooneys simply slipped out of the spotlight without a single word of explanation.
There's definitely something that made George and Amal finally wake up. George was sympathetic when they left the royal family, but I believe that was George's loyalty to Diana.
Really impacted Prince Harry. He thought he was going to be boys with Clooney for life. And then the couple ditched him for the real royals, a friendship which had actually got remarkably close, even though they had, quite wisely, I would say, from the Clooneys' side of things, never been pictured publicly with Harry and Meghan. Yes, there they were turning up at the wedding. Quite rightly, they never got that public picture.
Now, commentators are asking the question everyone's been thinking: did one of Hollywood's most influential couples silently walk away from the friendship? This story hits differently because the Clooneys weren't just another celebrity connection. At the peak of Harry and Meghan's global moment, they were among the most recognizable names attached to the couple. Back in 2018, the Sussexes were at the absolute center of worldwide attention. Their wedding was a massive international event watched by millions: royalty, business titans, and A-list celebrities all packed into one room. Among them, George and Amal Clooney, whose attendance instantly became a major talking point. Many observers saw it as proof that Harry and Meghan had successfully bridged the gap between royal tradition and Hollywood royalty.
Because what the Clooneys have done here isn't have a big falling out. So there hasn't been a big bust-up like the type of bust-up there was with the Beckhams. The Clooneys are just shrewd operators and soon realised that Harry and Meghan were revolting grifters who were going to throw their own family under the bus, and they were desperate to get back in with the royal family, which worked, by the way, because Charles is all over them.
Things moved fast after that. Just months later, reports surfaced that Harry and Meghan had been invited to George Clooney's legendary Lake Como villa in Italy, a destination reserved for only the most influential people on the planet. Then, in 2019, George stepped up publicly and defended Meghan as the media pressure intensified. He criticized what he called unfair treatment and even referenced the kind of scrutiny once aimed at Princess Diana. For Harry, those words reportedly hit deep. Very few public figures spoke up for Meghan that boldly, and even fewer brought his mother into the conversation while doing so. From the outside, the bond looked unbreakable. The Clooneys had graduated from wedding guests to what appeared to be trusted, loyal allies. Reports suggest Harry believed both couples shared the same values and understood the weight of living life under a global spotlight better than almost anyone else. Most importantly, he reportedly expected that friendship to last. So what happened next is what keeps this story alive, because after Harry and Meghan stepped away from royal duties and relocated to California, several of those high-profile friendships began to quietly disappear.
Now, I love that. Can I just say I love that? And I'm no fan of the Clooneys, okay, who are awful woke lefties. I am no fan. I'm just being honest. Like the guy in ER, that's where it ends. However, I do love the fact that it is the Clooneys that are now delivering Harry and Meghan a taste of their own medicine. They're being ghosted. See how it feels? Not very nice, is it? But incredibly well deserved.
But according to some reports, few shifts attracted more attention than the growing distance between the Sussexes and the Clooneys. As the years passed, observers noticed something striking: no joint appearances, no public signs of a continuing bond, and little indication that the once close connection was still standing. And reportedly, Harry never saw any of this coming. That's what makes this story so much bigger than a typical celebrity falling out. This is about what may have happened when one of Hollywood's most influential couples appeared to quietly change direction without saying a single word publicly. At first, barely anyone noticed. The Clooneys were never known for plastering their social life all over the internet. But as time went on, royal commentators and entertainment reporters started flagging something hard to ignore. The public connection between the Clooneys and the Sussexes had practically vanished. The shift became impossible to miss after Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties in 2020 and landed in California. Everyone assumed this was the beginning of a bold new chapter, a fresh identity built around media, business, and influence.
But I do find it funny because pretty much all of the A-listers that didn't know Harry and Meghan that were at the wedding have nothing to do with Harry and Meghan now, and they do work with the royal family. They are close to the royal family. You've got the Beckhams, for example. You've got the Elbas, Idris Elba. You know, he was the DJ at Harry's wedding.
And given the relationship they'd built with the Clooneys, most observers expected George and Amal to be right there alongside them. That never happened. No major public appearances, no high-profile events attended together, no photographs. The friendship that once generated so much buzz just quietly evaporated from public view. Then things got even more interesting. In 2023, George and Amal showed up at the King's Trust Awards, a major event directly tied to King Charles. The timing was impossible to overlook. Harry's memoir Spare had already exploded across headlines worldwide, igniting intense debate about royal relationships and family dynamics. Yet, there were the Clooneys, sitting front and center at an event supporting one of the King's most prominent charitable initiatives. Whether it was intentional or not, the contrast was sharp, and people noticed. Around the same time, reports began circulating that Harry and Meghan were no longer anywhere near the Clooneys' expanding philanthropic network. No appearances, no visible connection, just absence. Then came the claim that really got people talking.
But I do believe that most of the people that were there, they were only there because they wanted proximity to the royal family. It was never about Harry and Meghan. So as soon as Harry and Meghan started burning those bridges, they'd already obviously just saw it as they're just grifters. They're a waste of time. We can't get anything from them. And then they went back to actually getting close to the royal family.
According to various reports, Harry allegedly made repeated attempts over the years to reconnect with George and Amal. But communication reportedly became harder and harder to maintain. Messages were said to go unanswered for long stretches. Potential meetups and invitations reportedly went nowhere. And when contact did happen, commentators described it as polite, but noticeably cooler than before. No blow-up, no confrontation, no dramatic moment to point to, just a slow, creeping silence. And that detail is what makes this so much harder to shake, because public arguments between celebrities get resolved all the time. Friendships survive fallouts. But when communication slowly disappears without explanation, that kind of distance is a whole different story. According to sources cited in various reports, Harry reportedly found the whole situation especially painful because there was never a clear explanation, no defining moment, no single event that officially closed the door, just silence and a long list of unanswered questions. One source claimed Harry genuinely believed the Clooneys would be part of his family's life for the long haul.
They just sort of quietly moved on. Oh yeah, we'll see you at some stage. You know, maybe we'll lend you our private jet again in 10 years' time. But it hasn't happened. And trust me, It will never happen.
He reportedly saw them as trusted friends who truly understood pressures that almost nobody else on Earth experiences. If that's accurate, the reported distance hits even harder because from Harry's perspective, this wasn't just another celebrity connection fizzling out. This was one of the most powerful and recognizable couples in the world, slowly pulling away. And according to those reports, watching that happen left him feeling genuinely disappointed and unsettled. The longer the silence stretched, the louder it became. By this point, royal commentators were already asking whether the apparent distance from the Clooneys was part of a much bigger pattern. Was this just a friendship naturally evolving, or was it a sign of something harder to ignore? And as people started examining the timeline more closely, they noticed something striking. The reported distance seemed to grow at the exact same time that Harry's relationship with the royal family was hitting its most turbulent stretch.
Even though I do think George and Amal Clooney use a lot of their humanitarian work to push their own celebrity and business interest and profile, even they realized that Harry and Meghan were such faux humanitarians that it was just going to be bad for their brand.
They're toxic. They're toxic.
That raised one very uncomfortable question. Why did George and Amal appear to step back? The honest answer is that nobody outside those two couples knows exactly what went down behind closed doors. Neither George nor Amal has publicly addressed the friendship, and Harry and Meghan have never directly responded to the speculation, but that hasn't stopped commentators from forming theories. One of the most talked about explanations centers on what happened after Harry and Meghan stepped away from royal duties. In the early days, public support was visible. George had already spoken up for Meghan publicly, calling out what he viewed as unfair media treatment, but as time moved on, the story got a lot more complicated. The Oprah interview landed like a bomb, sparking one of the most widely discussed royal controversies in modern history. Suddenly, deeply private family matters were playing out on a global stage. Then came Netflix.
But the fact that George defended her that one time, and then obviously when they continuously attacked the royal family, this wasn't the one interview that they said they were going to do when they appeared on Oprah. You know, they just turned around and said, I don't actually think he defended them after Oprah. I think he initially defended Meghan when they first started the story, saying that they still wanted to be part of the monarchy. They just wanted to live in Canada. They wanted a quiet life. And I think that's when George was like, oh yeah, oh bless them.
Then came Spare. Then came the interviews, the documentaries, the public statements. Each release reignited the debate. Each project pulled Harry and the royal family back into the headlines. And for some observers, this may have been the turning point inside certain Hollywood circles. Most celebrities are comfortable watching controversy unfold from a safe distance. Very few are willing to stay visibly attached to it. That theory carries weight when you consider how carefully George and Amal have built their public image over the years. Their brand is rooted in philanthropy, international humanitarian work, and long-term influence, prestige, stability, a carefully maintained reputation. Some commentators argue that the Sussexes were drifting toward a very different kind of media narrative, one defined less by positive momentum and more by ongoing public debate, family dynamics, business ventures, media projects, public messaging. Nearly every major move seemed to spark a fresh wave of controversy. For image-conscious observers, a close and visible association with that level of turbulence may have started to feel like a risk not worth taking. Another factor that keeps coming up: the royal family itself.
I am also told, by the way, the reason that this has hurt Harry so badly is because he really does connect Clooney with Princess Diana. You will remember in the days after Diana's death, Clooney really became the biggest international celebrity other than Tom Cruise to launch a lifelong campaign against the paparazzi. At the time, he was one of the most famous TV actors in the world.
Unlike many Hollywood celebrities, George and Amal have continued showing up within charitable and royal-adjacent circles tied directly to the monarchy. Their appearance at the King's Trust Awards was widely read as a signal that those relationships are still very much alive. For critics of Harry and Meghan, that appearance carried serious symbolic weight. It suggested that while the Sussexes were increasingly operating outside traditional royal structures, the Clooneys were quietly keeping their connections to the institution intact. Fair or not, that interpretation spread fast and became a major part of the wider conversation. Then there's perhaps the most straightforward theory of all opportunity. Many commentators have pointed out that plenty of celebrities who attended Harry and Meghan's wedding weren't exactly lifelong close friends beforehand. That wedding was one of the most talked about events on the planet. An invitation meant prestige, massive media exposure, and a front row seat to one of the most recognized institutions in the world. But once Harry and Meghan stepped away from royal duties, some observers believe the value of those connections shifted dramatically. Certain royal commentators argue that celebrities initially drawn to the glamour and influence surrounding the monarchy eventually realized the Sussexes now occupied a very different position, one without the royal title, without the institution, and without the platform that once made those connections so attractive.
Everything about those two is completely toxic. They can't be ambassadors for child online safety, for being eco warriors. They can't, I mean, everything that Harry and Meghan have done since they left the royal family, they've shown themselves to be complete and utter hypocrite.
There's no hard public evidence backing that theory, but the perception keeps the conversation burning online. What makes the Clooney story stand out is how perfectly it fits into a narrative critics have been pushing for years, that many of the powerful, high-profile figures once regularly linked to Harry and Meghan are simply no longer visible in their lives. Whether that fully reflects reality is impossible to confirm. But in celebrity culture, perception doesn't need a receipt. It becomes the story all on its own. And right now, that perception is impossible to ignore, because when one of the world's most influential couples appears to quietly walk in a different direction, people start asking questions, and once those questions start, they never stay focused on just one friendship. What makes the situation especially uncomfortable for some observers isn't just the reported distance between the couples, it's where George and Amal appeared to be spending their time instead. While Harry was publicly discussing his royal experiences through interviews, documentaries, and Spare, the Clooneys were increasingly popping up at events tied directly to the monarchy and its charitable network. The clearest example? George and Amal at the King's Trust Awards, an event closely linked to King Charles and his charitable work.
And the Clooneys, actually, credit to them for never actually getting the public picture, which Harry and Meghan so desperately wanted.
She is a mimic. This is how Meghan builds her relationships with people. This is how she duped Harry. She mimicked Diana. This is what Meghan does. I mean, I'm sure a psychologist could diagnose it a bit better than what I could. But I believe that when Meghan says, "Today, Matthew, I'm going to be a humanitarian," she flicks through and goes, "Right, this is going to be my Angelina Jolie outfit." And then the next day she's like, "Right, I'm going to be today a fashionista."
For years, Harry had positioned himself as someone operating completely outside the institution he once represented. Yet one of the couples he was reportedly closest to was now standing inside an event connected directly to his father. The contrast was hard to look away from. Back in 2018, Harry and Meghan looked like the future, young, globally recognized, pulling attention from both royal watchers and Hollywood heavyweights. Many believed they would become the monarchy's most powerful bridge to the entertainment world. Instead, the years that followed told a completely different story, a step back from royal duties, a move to California, major media deals, documentaries, books, and a very public unraveling of relationships with senior royals. Meanwhile, the Clooneys stayed out of it. No public involvement in the debates surrounding Harry's claims. No statements, no visible role in any of the controversies that followed. They kept their heads down, focused on their own philanthropy, legal work, and global engagements. For critics, the comparison was striking. One couple appeared to be moving further and further from the institution.
You know, she is just a continuous stream of a dressing up box. She's constantly trying on other people's skin, as it were. And it's creepy, but then at the same time, it's become comical because we can see it. You can see it all of the time. She's never once really, I don't think, shown her own personality. She's always trying to mimic or to copy someone because she's got nothing original about her.
The other seemed perfectly comfortable keeping a foot inside the door. The symbolism cuts even deeper when you remember that George Clooney once publicly defended Meghan loudly and on the record. His 2019 comments made global headlines and positioned him as one of the most recognizable celebrity voices in her corner. Yet after that moment, public support went quiet. No statements during the fallout from the Oprah interview, no comments when Spare dropped, no visible presence during any of the major controversies that followed in the years ahead. For royal commentators, that silence became its own headline. George Clooney is not someone known for staying quiet on things he genuinely cares about. Throughout his career, he has spoken openly on humanitarian causes, international issues, and social matters. When he backs someone, he usually makes it known publicly and without hesitation. That's exactly why his growing absence from anything Sussex-related started feeling so significant and so difficult to explain away. A friendship that once generated international headlines had become almost completely invisible. And while Harry's complicated relationship with the monarchy remained a dominant public topic year after year, the Clooneys were quietly moving through royal and charitable circles without any obvious public connection to him. For critics, that contrast wasn't subtle, it was glaring. But here's what really elevates this beyond a single celebrity rumor. The Clooney situation might have stayed as one isolated story if it were the only example on the table. The problem is,
Yeah, they've done it in such a way where they just completely cut them off, so it didn't allow any of these, tit for tat sort of celebrity arguments, or like people stir it up and they're like, oh, there's been a bit of a fallout. No, there was just absolutely nothing.
it isn't. When Harry and Meghan married in 2018, St. George's Chapel was packed with some of the biggest names on the planet. Actors, athletes, media executives, television personalities, international figures. The guest list itself became a headline before the ceremony even ended. Many of those attendees had little publicly documented history with Harry or Meghan before that invitation arrived. But the wedding was one of the most prestigious and globally watched social events in living memory, and being present meant something enormous at the time. Fast forward just a few years, and royal commentators started asking one very simple but deeply loaded question: where did all those connections actually go? David Beckham is one of the most frequently mentioned examples. He and Victoria attended the wedding and were widely viewed as genuinely friendly with the Sussexes. But reports of tension eventually surfaced, and today David Beckham's most visible royal associations involve King Charles and Prince William. His public connection to Harry and Meghan has generated almost no headlines by comparison, and that shift has not gone unnoticed. Then, there's Idris Elba, the man who literally stood behind the DJ booth at Harry and Meghan's wedding celebrations and was one of the most recognizable celebrity faces attached to that entire event. Since then, Idris has remained actively involved in charitable projects connected to royal organizations. Any visible public connection to the Sussexes, however, has quietly stepped back from view.
In Harry's mind, they were not just famous acquaintances from the wedding guest list. He saw them as powerful friends who understood the pressures of global scrutiny, philanthropy, and public life in a way very few people could. Indeed, he thought there was a special bond.
No major joint appearances, no public statements, just a gradual drift that mirrors what many others in that original wedding circle appear to have experienced. For critics, these examples keep reinforcing the same uncomfortable narrative that celebrities once regularly and visibly associated with Harry and Meghan now appear, at least in public, far more connected to the royal family than to the couple who walked away from it. Whether that perception fully captures reality is genuinely impossible to confirm, but in the world of celebrity culture and royal commentary, perception carries enormous weight. It shapes conversations, drives media coverage, and influences how the public interprets everything that follows. The wedding that once showcased Harry and Meghan's extraordinary global reach now looks remarkably different when viewed through the lens of everything that came afterward. Several of those high-profile connections simply don't exist in the same visible, documented way anymore. Some relationships faded organically over time.
I do find it funny that all of those people that they invited that they didn't know to basically name drop. But yeah, now they have nothing to do with them. It seems that Harry and Meghan just burn bridges with absolutely everybody.
Some became attached to reports of disagreements and behind-the-scenes tension, and some, like the Clooney situation, dissolved so quietly and so gradually that most people only registered the absence long after it had already happened. That slow disappearance is a significant part of why this story continues pulling people in. It's not purely about George and Amal. It's about a far bigger and more uncomfortable question surrounding Harry and Meghan's entire post-royal trajectory. And that question doesn't have a clean or simple answer. Back in 2020, supporters were genuinely convinced the Sussexes were positioning themselves to become major, lasting forces within Hollywood and global media. The combination looked almost impossible to beat: worldwide name recognition, landmark media deals, an established celebrity network, and a royal history unlike anything the entertainment world had ever seen up close. The opportunities appeared limitless. Yet, several years on, critics point to a growing list of once high-profile associates who are no longer publicly linked to the couple in any meaningful or consistent way. The Clooneys, the Beckhams, various celebrity figures whose names were splashed across coverage of the wedding era. Individually, each situation carries its own unique context and circumstances.
Well, she's
many
moved
people.
on to another humanitarian now, Tash. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
It's Queen Esther who has done some brilliant work on this, posting Meghan Markle putting on the Angelina Jolie humanitarian face again.
No two relationships are identical, and drawing straight lines between unrelated stories involves real risk of oversimplification. But together, these examples have contributed to building a narrative that seems to follow Harry and Meghan into nearly every new chapter of their public life. It's a narrative that keeps circling back to the same core question: have the influential figures who once stood most visibly alongside the Sussexes gradually moved on? And is the apparent disappearance of George Clooney from Harry's public world simply the most high-profile and most discussed version of a pattern that runs much deeper? What makes the Clooney chapter particularly striking is precisely what didn't happen. There was no dramatic public fallout, no explosive interview, no leaked statements or carefully worded public responses. When reports of tension between Harry and the Beckhams emerged, headlines followed almost immediately. Similar media attention surrounded other rumored disagreements involving the Sussexes over the years. But with George and Amal, the record stayed completely clean, and somehow that made the story even more fascinating to follow. No confrontation, no criticism, no moment anyone could isolate and examine. Just a slow, creeping silence that left behind no clear explanation, no defining event, and no obvious turning point. One chapter. The Clooneys were among the most visible and credible celebrity allies connected to Harry and Meghan's world. A few chapters later, they were almost entirely absent from it. And the space between those two realities remains largely unexplained. For a couple once celebrated as the ultimate bridge between the world's most famous royal institution and the global entertainment industry,
Interesting details has also emerged this week, Tash, about more of the fallout between Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, Zara, and Mike Tyndall.
losing a connection that prominent and that visible naturally invites serious questions. Not just about one friendship, but about the broader landscape surrounding them. For critics, those questions have grown steadily louder with each passing year, and each new example that surfaces adds another layer to an already complex picture. Some observers have also pointed to a deeper tension that may have made maintaining certain friendships increasingly difficult over time. Harry and Meghan's public journey since 2020 has been defined by transparency, or at least a very visible version of it. Interviews, documentaries, memoirs, and public statements have placed deeply personal experiences into the global conversation on a scale that very few public figures have ever attempted. For some allies, that level of ongoing public exposure may have created complications that private conversations simply couldn't resolve. George and Amal Clooney, by contrast, have built their public profile on a foundation of carefully maintained discretion alongside their advocacy work. They engage publicly on causes they champion, but they have historically kept the details of their personal relationships, private social circles, and behind-the-scenes friendships largely out of the spotlight. For a couple that operates that way, sustained proximity to that volume of public attention regardless of personal feelings may have presented a genuine challenge. That doesn't mean a choice was made, and it doesn't mean a falling out occurred.
I believe Meghan would have been fueling that one. I believe it would have been perfect for Meghan to turn Harry against yet another family member that she knows she's close with. Whilst there's lots of things that I do not blame Meghan for with Harry's behavior and his decisions and his actions, she definitely manipulated him. So the first people that he fell out with had to be Catherine, because she was a female influence in his life. He had obviously grown very, very close to her. He saw her as a sister. For Meghan, that was a threat. She needed to control him. So for seeing something like this pop up at the wedding, I believe she would have been, look at her face. I can't believe she did that. That's humiliating for us. She would have definitely been that bug in his ear. So then he would have said something.
But it does highlight how two couples with very different approaches to public life might find it increasingly difficult to maintain the same level of visible closeness over time. The circumstances that brought them together in 2018 were extraordinary and unique. The circumstances that followed were equally extraordinary, but in a very different direction. Only the four people at the center of this story genuinely know what transpired behind closed doors. Friendships evolve in ways that outsiders rarely fully understand. Personal dynamics shift. Priorities change. Private relationships don't always match the picture that public appearances paint, and the absence of visible connection doesn't automatically tell the full story of what may or may not exist privately. But certain publicly observable facts remain consistent and difficult to set aside. The couple who attended the wedding opened the doors of their Lake Como home and publicly defended Meghan during one of her most scrutinized periods are no longer visibly connected to the Sussexes in any documented, public-facing way. That gap between what once was and what currently appears to be is real, regardless of what explanations may exist behind it. Whether this friendship gradually faded under the weight of changing circumstances, or whether something more specific and significant shifted the dynamic, remains genuinely unknown. The full picture may never become public, and in the absence of that clarity, the speculation will almost certainly continue. What is absolutely clear is this: the connection that once looked like one of the strongest, most credible, and most high-profile celebrity bonds surrounding Harry and Meghan no longer carries the same visible presence it once did. And for a couple navigating one of the most scrutinized post-royal journeys in modern history, that reality adds yet another complicated layer to an already deeply complex story. For Prince Harry, it may represent one of the most quietly painful and most publicly discussed chapters of everything that followed that extraordinary wedding day back in 2018. If this story had you hooked from start to finish, hit that like button right now and make sure you subscribe so you never miss what we cover next. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the Clooneys simply moved on naturally, or is there something bigger underneath all of this that we still don't know? Share this with someone who would find this fascinating, and we will see you in the next one.